I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
We are Velocities of Music. Today, we have a special edition of Velocities of Music, the podcast, an artist interview with Emily and Dan from the band Cross Record.
Their album Wabi-Sabi came out in January of 2016, and right from the get-go, Jake and I figured it would probably be one of our favorites from the year. Really strong record.
The track Steady Waves from Wabi-Sabi won me a week in Music League and has gone on to be one of my favorite songs from the year. This is an album that I've revisited throughout the year, so spoiler alert, probably will show up very high on our favorite albums of 2016 list, but Emily and Dan were kind enough to agree to do an interview with us, so here's our takes from the interview.
How are you guys?
Good, how are you doing?
We're doing great.
Great.
So you guys released Wabi-Sabi at the beginning of 2016, and now we're approaching the end of the year. It's getting to the holidays now. How do you feel about how 2016 went in terms of growth as a band and overall reception of Wabi-Sabi as an album?
I'm happy with everything. I'm not sure that I don't really think about it that much, to be honest with you.
Sure.
So that's a hard question for me. But I wasn't expecting anything at all. So any like top 40 lists or like best albums of the year lists that we've been on this year has been a really awesome surprise for us, and we've been able to get some TV spots and stuff like that. So we're happy with how it's gone, and the feedback that we've gotten has been very positive, and we're just really thankful for anyone listening, really.
Great. Well, not to spoil the surprise, but you're definitely going to end up on our end of the year list as well. So
Yay.
There's another one on there.
Thank you.
How would you describe the sound of Cross Record that you guys are going for to the Velocities of Music community? And specifically, what kind of sound were you trying to create on Wabi-Sabi?
We didn't necessarily enter into it thinking we need to make it sound like anything in particular. In general, I tend to like slower, heavier types of sounds. And Dan has a more pop sensibility, I would say. I love pop music, but I don't know that I, production-wise, always go there.
Sure. So
it's interesting to work with Dan because of that. I think that we butt heads a lot, and that generates some interesting results. But as far as like what we sound like, I would say, what would you say, Dan?
What we sound like?
Yeah. If we were to describe it to someone. Dark, moody, with pretty vocals. That's what Dan says.
It's pretty apropos.
Yeah, I would say so. So you mentioned that that the two of you might butt heads a little bit. What about that relationship working together makes the process easier in some ways, or maybe even more challenging in ways?
I think that it's valuable because if I was making sounds and someone else were just telling me it sounded great all the time and nothing was wrong, I don't think that, first of all, I would grow very much as an artist. And second of all, it would challenge me in the good types of ways. But I just think that there's a back and forth that happens that is very necessary for us to get what we want out of what we're working on and what sounds we have. So it's easier to work with him at the end, I guess, like when we've made most of the decisions and we're surprised by what has happened. But in the beginning, it's challenging for sure. Mostly it's like him having all these amazing ideas, but me not thinking they fit. And then, I don't know if that makes sense. What would you say, Dan?
She tends to push my focus in directions that are maybe uncomfortable but yield more interesting results than I would normally get.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So you mentioned the sound being a little bit darker, a little bit heavier. And to my ears, when I'm listening to Cross Record, the production is really an important part of the sound, especially on the new album. And not just from a presentation perspective, but also as kind of a part of the actual composition. That is, the production style, to me, really shapes even the songwriting at times. How do those two elements the production of the songs and the songwriting itself kind of impact each other for you, and how does that influence your writing and recording process?
I would say since we're doing all of it ourselves, like we are the producers and Dan is the engineer, and we're both sitting there together doing a lot of it, and Dan is spending a lot of time with it by himself also in the mixing phases. But I think that the writing is affected. Well, we do most of the writing like in that phase. So I generally will come up with some sort of skeleton, but not always even. I'll just come with like lyrics or some sort of small idea. And then it's sort of just made in the studio. So it's all happening at the same time usually. And maybe that's what you're talking about when you can say you hear the importance of the production.
Yeah.
It's less like there's like decisions made afterwards, but they're all just happening at the same time. So
sure. So it's kind of a constant, bouncing back and forth between, shaping the song, but also getting the correct sound to kind of drive each other, really.
Yeah, it's a process, like a constant process until we say it's done.
So Tom and I are certainly guilty of really loving albums that have a tendency to just be overflowing with ideas and not afraid to kind of sprawl out and experiment and not adhere to a single structure. So reflecting on Wabi-Sabi, it's a record full of subtlety, not just in production, but also in terms of the instrumentation and layers that you guys add to the composition. How do you guys decide when to add a new layer or like when a new instrument needs to be added to the mix? And do you ever find yourself feeling that you've added too much or need to strip it back? Like, how do you find that balance?
Yeah, that's a great question. Our rule is that if something doesn't have to be there, we should take it out or not add something else. So, and it's hard because sometimes moods really play into that. If you are in a certain mood, and you might think it needs something, and then the next morning you get up and you listen to it and you're like, what was I thinking? So
Yep.
It's really dependent on a lot of variables, but yeah, usually we look at it objectively or try to at least and figure out, is this cool sound in there because it needs it, or is it in there just because it's cool? And if it's just because it's cool, then we'll take it out.
Yeah, that's a really good approach, and it makes sense with listening to your albums, because it feels like there's a lot going on sometimes, but it's more just that what's there plays off of each other well.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a big recording nut myself, and one thing that your music has that really intrigues me from a recording standpoint is that it's got a very strong sense of space to it. It's almost three-dimensional.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you approach and achieve that quality? Is it just big room mics? Is it more of a recording thing or more of a production and mixing decision?
Well, Dan is a big fan of throwing up room mics, whatever we're doing. So I think that has a lot to do with it. And that's always been important to me because I do like to feel like I'm in the space when I'm listening to music and not like it's in some sort of vacuum, although that can be cool too. But there's some sort of magic sometimes that happens just in the room that you might as well try to catch, and you can always delete it. You can always take out the room mic. So
yeah.
Do you have anything to say about that, Dan?
I guess on the recordings, usually we try to make it feel like it's in. I don't know. We tend to go for a bigger space sonically, just something that seems more vast and open than like sort of like just a bedroomy sound. Even on the stuff where it's really intimate, I think there's an emotional depth or space that we are just kind of subconsciously after. And whether we use actual physical parts of the space, like the room mics and stuff to create that, or we use reverbs and delays or just ways to manufacture it, I think there's just a place where we both feel at home with this sound, and we're always kind of trying to expand what that means.
Along with that, one other question I had about the sound itself, you tend to use samples and sometimes found sounds in your music. How do those get incorporated, and when do you decide to use those? Are you usually maybe looking for something to fit a certain song or fill a certain void? Or are you just kind of continuously gathering cool sounds that you encounter and then working them in later?
Yeah, it happens in different ways. It just depends on what the song needs sometimes. And we hear, we'll know that we need some sort of top-endy sparkly sound, and then we'll go looking for it. But we have a bunch of these cool sound effects records that we listen to every now and then and grab samples from. And Dan and I are always kind of sampling stuff on our phones. And I think a lot of musicians just naturally gravitate towards that kind of collecting, just in case. So yeah, I guess to answer your question, a little bit of both. We don't obsessively collect samples all the time.
So a minute ago, when we were talking about how you guys try to find that right balance of adding the right amount of layers and then also creating that sense of space and atmosphere. One of the things I love about both Be Good and Wabi-Sabi is the albums just seem to evolve and have this sense of they're it's like you're taking the listener to another world, but yet there's so much just happening within each track that it almost seems like it's meant to go along with some sort of like visual component. So what kind of visuals inspire you guys, and how do they translate into your sound? And do certain kinds of imagery become more equal to like certain kinds of sounds?
Well, I'm sure you know, but I am a visual artist as well, and I'm always thinking about things in a visual way. I don't know how exactly that translates into a specific sound, but at least in my mind, the songs have visual components that don't necessarily, manifest in any physical way. They're just in my head. But that's a hard question to answer. I don't know if for Dan it's the same way. I don't know if he necessarily has like a visual component when he's writing music or working on our music. I don't know. I guess I don't really know how to answer that question. It's too close to me.
No, that's understandable. So it's more just kind of, there's not really necessarily for you a direct, correlation from the visual element and the music. They just kind of, they both just kind of coexist.
Yeah. Yeah, like I'm always working on a batch of drawings at any given moment, and that bleeds into the music, and the music affects my drawings too, and it's all kind of just one headspace that I get into.
Getting back to the new album, Wabi-Sabi, a little bit, looking into the background of the album, and of course, doing some research on it, finding that Wabi-Sabi, the term itself, comes from this Japanese concept of finding beauty in imperfection, almost glorifying it. I think that's a really important idea to consider in a somewhat superficial world that often values, unrealistic perfection over maybe honesty and the acceptance of flaws. That can certainly be found, I would say, on this album where you're really incorporating natural sounds that may otherwise be overlooked, and they come together to create a beautiful musical picture. Things like tape hiss or the room noise. Also, like there's this kind of slight crack distortion that are just embraced and part of that sonic texture, instead of trying to be covered up.
Yeah.
And I promise there's an actual question in here. I'm getting to it. For that reason, I think that the album title is really perfect. It's very fitting to the music. But looking forward for what's next for you guys as a band, beyond this album, is that a concept you want to continue exploring, or is it mainly just you thought it really captured this album well, and you want to evolve it differently from there?
I think that it has always been a very important theme in the way I make music, and I just wanted to express it on this album, or name it after that this time, but it's always going to be highlighted in or I shouldn't say it's always. I have no idea if I'll change my mind or what's going to happen, but as far as I can tell, I'm always going to be celebrating, the imperfect sound and, kind of like the chance sounds that happen to, with the remakes. And I don't ever see that being something that I'm trying to hide or cover up in the future. Mm-hmm. If anything, I want to get more to the core of that. But to answer your question, it's not specific to this record. I just found the term for it, and I thought that it was a great title, so that's why I called it that.
Cool. Yeah, it is. Like I said, I think it is a really great title. It captures the music really well there.
Thank you.
So you're currently, living and working, I understand, in Dripping Springs, Texas, which is a pretty small town.
Yeah.
Jake and I are from rural Iowa. That's where we're at right now. So I understand, the small town vibe. That's what we grew up around.
Yeah.
And to me, like, I'm thinking, from our perspective here in Iowa, if someone like you was making music in the way that you are, in one of the small towns in our area, it would definitely be the most exciting thing going on around here, at least for people like us who get excited about music. So in your time there, have you gotten to know the people of Dripping Springs very well? Do you get a sense that they know who you are and what you're doing?
I would say that we both work in Dripping Springs, so of course we know some people in Dripping Springs, but it is there's a lot of families and, like school-age children and teenagers, so we don't necessarily connect with them on a regular basis, and we are really close to Austin, so we spend a lot of our time there as well, but and just at our house being hermits. The people that we have gotten to know in the community definitely know us as different than the rest of the families there. So I guess I don't know if that answered your question, but
do these people know that you have alter egos?
Yeah, people know that we're a little bit off. Also, one time I shaved my head, and that was very, risque. Or not risque,
small town
but
Texas.
Very shocking to a lot of people here who would never think of cutting their hair like that. But
right.
It's fun. Everyone loves us.
You got to shake things up.
Yeah, sometimes.
So on that same topic, do you guys plan to stay in Dripping Springs for the foreseeable future, or do you think you'd relocate in the future, and how would that ever influence your music?
We have no plans to leave. We really, really love it, and our house is very special to us. We don't own it, but we really love it there, so we don't have any plans to leave, but you never know.
Well, I'll tell you what, in preparing for this and just, trying to do some research, I came across this short PBS, like, kind of documentary about both of you.
Yeah.
And just from watching that, I wouldn't want to leave that place. It looks gorgeous. Like, oh my gosh.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
You guys should come visit.
That would be great, because it looks, especially just thinking about it in a, from a musical context, as a place where you can really feel inspired, have the freedom to do what you want musically. That's pretty darn cool.
I've also never been to Austin.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Come on down.
So you guys are kicking off a tour going, kind of along the southern and eastern United States.
Yeah.
When you're putting together set lists for shows, what factors do you consider? What are you trying to achieve in a live performance?
Just a good dynamic and exciting, exciting arc, I guess. Like we consider, because we kind of have two different vibes to our music, I guess, live at least. We have like the more rock songs, and then we have the more moody, atmospheric ones. Mm-hmm. And we really want to showcase both of those. So with this tour, I think we're going to go for, in the beginning, it's a little more moody and atmospheric, and it eases into the end being more like rock and drum, guitar heavy. Just finishing on a nice and strong note is fun for us. And our set is really short. It's like 30 minutes because we're opening. So we don't have a whole lot of time to show someone what we're all about. And we want to make sure that we bring a little bit of each flavor that we have.
Nice. So
Yeah.
Along the lines of touring, do you guys have any like preferred venues or like what's the criteria that makes a venue awesome for you guys to play in?
The people mostly, and I don't know. I tend to like shittier venues actually.
Nice.
With like I don't mind a PA, just like a plain old PA, like in a garage or something. Sometimes I prefer that because sometimes when you start messing with all this like fancy monitoring systems and stuff, like there's nothing worse than getting up on the stage and feeling like you can't feel like the sub or anything like that. Like it just feels like, I don't know how to explain it to people that haven't been on stage before, but you've played in bands, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So like, when you're playing and you just don't feel like you can feel anything, like that it sounds good.
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, like it sounds good and it sounds controlled and nice, but that's just not how it feels good.
Yeah, like you don't feel like there's that connection off stage. Like there might as well just be a big wall up.
Yeah, like it's just so much more fun to feel like you're in it and feel the people's energy and feel, I don't know, those are the best kind of shows, I think.
Do you think that's more decided by the sound, the venue, the crowd themselves?
I don't know. It's just sometimes it's right and sometimes it's wrong. Yeah. I haven't really I haven't figured it out yet. I just know that I've played in some really nice, fancy venues and I've hated the show.
Yeah.
And I've played in a really crappy house with like beer cans and Cheetos everywhere. And that's been like a great show.
Yep.
So I don't know.
We, a few months ago, interviewed Joe Vickers. He's the drummer for the band Caspian, instrumental post-rock band. And, they have a lot of, kind of moodier, low dynamic moments as well. And, you mentioned we asked him a similar question here as what I'm about to ask you. But when, you mentioned that when you're creating a set list, when you're creating a show, you really want to make an experience. You want the songs to flow and create that arc, as you put it. Do you find that for those moodier, atmospheric moments, do you ever feel like there's trouble, getting the audience to connect with that? Are people ever talking and distracting you or anything like that?
Yes, that does definitely happen. I am a fan of just giving like a really scary eye contact situation.
That's a great tactic. I like that.
Yeah, it's fun because I don't know, because at first when you experience that, the first feeling one might have is like anger, like why the fuck is this person talking
right.
during my show? And then then I locate the person or the group of people and I just make sure I'm staring at them. And then it becomes this like funny thing where I'm like paying attention to them so hard that I kind of like get to feeling like invested in them. This is just sometimes this happens, but like I'll just, I'll be staring at the person and like maybe thinking about them and like they'll look at me and I feel like I have this moment with them that's like maybe neither good nor bad, but just kind of weird. And then like my anger dissolves because I realize that it's not all about me, even though I'm the one on stage, but like maybe this person really is excited about sharing, whatever they're sharing with the person next to them. But I don't know. I try not to get too hung up on whether or not people are being rude. I just try to do my best. And I think I've been focusing more on like being a good performer and making sure I'm doing whatever I'm doing to the best of my ability and then not really worry about whatever other people are doing. But the staring trick is really fun.
Yeah, and you mentioned really wanting to focus on what you're doing. And in some of the live performance videos I've seen of you guys, you're doing several things at once. Maybe alternating between some percussion, guitar, singing, some combination of all of that. Is that difficult to create those live arrangements, and how do you prioritize what aspects of the song you choose to represent on stage?
Yeah, that's something that we've really had to work hard to figure out, and we have had to compromise and even like not play songs because of that before. I don't know. I guess we just have to reinterpret them on a as needed basis. And like Dan, he does an insane amount of things at one time.
Yeah.
I don't even know how he does all of that stuff. I don't really even multitask anymore. I just sing and play guitar now because he's got it all under control. But yeah, we have to just pick and choose what we want to represent and what we think is going to be. Like, we wouldn't necessarily do the things we do on a recording. It's more about making it a good live show. So we make certain choices because we know it's going to translate well in a live setting. It's not important to us to really like hold our recordings to the utmost integrity, like translation wise, It's just important that the songs are good and entertaining, and then if someone listens to the record, they can at least recognize what song it was and enjoy a different translation of it, different interpretation of it.
So what's in the future for Cross Record? What do you guys have in store for your next record?
We're just starting to think about it. I'm writing right now, so we're just going to see how it goes. I don't have much expectation, to be honest with you. I'm just going to try to make some really good songs and see if we can make enough money to make another record. So we'll see how it goes.
Awesome.
One of our last questions here to kind of wrap things up. I'd love to hear, what have you been listening to lately? What music are you loving, just jamming out to, or maybe finding inspiration from?
I have been listening to the new Goat record, Requiem.
Nice.
Also the Ty Dolla $ign record.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and Rihanna's anti
mm-hmm.
a lot. And what else? I've been listening to the newish James Blake record as well, The Color and everything. But a lot, to be honest with you, a lot of like top, like hip hop, R&B radio I listen to a lot.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, if you ever end up doing a show in Iowa, you can definitely count on two guys here who are going to be there.
Absolutely.
Great.
If you ever find your way.
Awesome.
We don't always get the best shows coming through Iowa, but when they come, we're sure to show up. So
cool. I will talk to my booking agent about it.
Nice. So that wraps up pretty much all the questions that we had prepared for you guys.
Great.
Before we hang up, you have any questions for us?
What did you have for dinner?
I have not had dinner yet.
What?
Oh, I had really shitty leftover American Chinese food.
Ooh.
Oh, gross.
From Sunday.
From Sunday.
Yeah, it was the time where we either needed to eat it or throw it away, and we couldn't throw it away because we needed to.
Wow.
We needed to eat it.
Jake is representing the life of the father of two here.
Yeah.
So.
And I love
at
my.
least 8.
Yeah, I love my
true.
shitty Chinese food. It doesn't sound as tasty as Thai though. Gotta say.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. Our Thai food was really good.
Nice.
Maybe tomorrow night.
I hope you have leftovers, and they'll probably be good 3 days from now.
Yeah. Well, you guys have a great night. I really appreciate you listening to the record and having such nice things to say and taking time to do this with me.
Yeah, thank you very much for taking the time and give our thanks. I don't know if he's there listening, but give our thanks to Dan as well.
I will.
And thanks also just for the great music. We're looking forward to hearing what you're doing next.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Have a good night.
Bye.
So that wraps up our conversation with Emily and Dan from the indie band Cross Record.
If you haven't checked out Cross Records music, we'd highly recommend it. Their new album, Wabi-Sabi, is out now, one of our favorites of the year. And also, check out their touring schedule because they very well may be coming to a city near you sometime in December 2016.
And of course, big thanks to Emily and Dan again for taking the time to talk with us. Thank you guys for your continued support and participation. Tom and I love all of your comments on our YouTube videos, Facebook messages, and emails. Your participation in Velocities of Music is what makes this all possible. So as always, thank you for being awesome. I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
We are Velocities of Music, moving music discussion forward.